Hello, my name is Heather Chandler. Welcome to the Home and Energy Chats. I am the owner and publisher of the Green and Healthy Maine Homes magazine. And each episode, we chat with industry experts to help you learn about building healthy, efficient, and sustainable homes. This episode, we'll be talking about making the shift to whole home heat pumps. We'll learn how heat pumps work and also discuss energy upgrades like insulation and air sealing that can impact your heating system's performance. So, I would like to start by saying a very special thank you to our sponsors, including our annual sponsor, Royal River Heat Pumps, a locally owned and operated company that is nationally recognized for heat pump excellence and is 100% committed to the highest standards of quality installation, service practices, and customer satisfaction. You can learn more about them online at royalriverheatpumps.com. And also thank you to our season sponsor, Senecal Construction Services, offering net zero custom designs in Mid-Coast Maine. Senecal turns dream homes into reality with a team of passionate craftspeople and energy efficient quality. And you can learn more about Senecal at senecalconstruction.com. A little bit about us. Green and Healthy Maine Homes is dedicated to inspiring healthy, efficient, and future-ready Maine homes. In addition to these home and energy chats, we also publish a quarterly magazine and host the annual Green Home and Energy Show every spring. We publish a directory for finding Maine home professionals that specialize in helping you create healthy, efficient, and high-performing homes. And you can learn more about those at our website at greenmainehomes.com. It is my pleasure to introduce our panelists for the session today. Andy Meyer is a senior program manager at Efficiency Maine. He is a regular on Home and Energy Chats. His responsibilities include residential weatherization, heating systems, and appliances. He has inspected hundreds of homes, was certified by the Building Performance Institute as a building analyst, is certified to handle heat pump refrigerant, and has a bachelor's degree from Bowdoin College. So welcome, Andy.
Thank you.
Next, we have Richard Burbank, who is an energy advisor and president of Evergreen Home Performance, which he founded in 2006. He is passionate about educating homeowners on energy efficiency and takes an active role in ongoing education and mentoring of the Evergreen staff. It was his own efforts to insulate and improve his 1880s Rockland home that inspired his company. So welcome, Richard. And Colin is the owner of All Around Home Performance. He previously worked as a home energy auditor for the Mass Save program and as the senior technical field representative for Efficiency Maine's Quality Assurance Program. He is a certified energy auditor from the Building Performance Institute, is a trainer and proctor for BPI certification in Maine, and teaches the building science courses at SMCC and KVCC. Putting his energy efficiency experience to work, he has been renovating his 1915 home in Farmingdale to become a high-performance net zero energy home. So welcome, Colin.
All right, thank you for having me for today.
Thank you all for being with us today. Andy, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick us off as the heat pump expert for Efficiency Maine. Can you start by telling us a little bit about what it means to have whole home heat pumps? It seems obvious to those of us who are in the industry, but I think it would be great to hear from you. What does that mean to Efficiency Maine? And also, we've had several listeners ask if whole house heat pumps are different from wall-mounted units.
I'd be happy to, and I'll follow rules, but I did want to mention a couple things. It's really a special treat to be with my fellow panelists. Colin was my colleague and continues to be a mentor to me. Richard and his company, Evergreen Home Performance, just won the Efficiency Maine Insulator of the Year award last month, a big honor. And Heather's too modest to say it, but she and her organization earned Efficiency Maine's highest honor last month, the Philip Hastings Award. It recognizes extraordinary commitment to energy efficiency in Maine. There have only been about 14 people or organizations ever to get that award. So it's pretty cool for me to be with the big wigs. Answer to your question about whole house heat pumps. It's not that fancy. Heat pumps are ultra efficient heating and cooling devices. People know that they heat for about 1/3 less than oil, and they cost about 50% less than propane. Heat pumps can be used to heat just one room or an entire house. A whole home heat pump is a term that we kind of made up. It's very simple, simply a heat pump or collection of heat pumps that has enough capacity and distribution to keep an entire home or a whole home comfortable, even at the coldest temperature of the year. That's all we mean by whole home. It means not a room heater. And as far as you had a reader ask, a whole house heat pump system, how does it differ from a wall-mounted unit? The typical whole home heat pump consists of one or more wall units, but it can be any combination: wall units, floor units, ceiling units, ducted units. It's kind of like asking the difference between a commuter vehicle and a pickup truck. You can commute in a pickup truck if you want to. So most whole home heat pumps include one or more wall units. Hopefully that answers the question.
And it's essentially using the heat pumps as the primary heating source and not having another system.
Yes, primary heating system throughout the heating system season. And the ones that we rebate have to, in order to get a rebate, they have to be sized to keep a house at least 70 degrees Fahrenheit during the coldest hour of the year. And so it depends on zip code. Whole home heat pumps that we rebate are all sized to keep a house warm all year long.
So Efficiency Maine made some significant changes to that rebate program about a year ago and really went all in on the whole home approach to heating systems. So can you tell us a little bit about why Efficiency Maine made that switch? And also, we obviously live in a really cold climate. Last night when I took the dog out, kind of wished I had a hat, like starting to feel that. So it's making me think about winter. So maybe touch on how heat pumps work here in Maine.
Sure. You asked about whole home heat pumps. We've always been rebating whole home heat pumps and room heaters. And last year we stopped rebating room heaters. The reasons is they were selling very, very well, $25,000 a year using our $200 to $800 rebates. And the federal government has just come out with a federal tax credit that's applicable to both room heaters and whole home heat pumps of up to $2,000 per year. So we didn't feel that we need to continue to put our rebate money on them. They're selling well and they've got tax credits that we've never had before. Another reason is Maine's got a Maine won't wait climate policy that sets goals for us. And one goal is 115,000 whole home heat pumps by 2030. We wanted the room heaters is going extremely well. We wanted to focus our rebate dollars on whole home to make that goal. And just obviously a whole home heat pump is going to save more money and reduce emissions more than a room heater would. And one of the reasons is they don't have to compete with the boiler. There would be no boiler in use in a home that has a whole home heat pump. And lastly, the technology is now ready. Heat pumps work really well in the cold. You ask, how do they work? There are heat pumps available now that will heat a house at negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And that's not wind chill. Heat pumps love wind chill. That's why their outdoor units have fans on them. When a heat pump sees negative 22 degrees air blowing by, it sees it as the source of heat. That's ironic, but that is actually where heat comes from for a heat pump. We've got thousands. Do they work in the cold? Yeah, we have thousands of homes. My home for the last 12 years, thousands of homes are heating exclusively with heat pumps. And I'll give you an example. My house in February of 2023, it was negative 34 degrees wind chill in our yard, negative 34. And we got a little nervous, to be honest. We got so nervous, we almost turned on half the heat pumps in the house, but we didn't need to. 3 out of the 8 was all we needed to keep the house at 70 degrees. So they work. And people see on our website, we've got testimonials from people reporting being warm as low as -49 degrees wind chill. So heat pumps are now capable of keeping Maine homes warm in any Maine weather. So they work really well in the cold.
And the key is really using the equipment that is approved and rebated by Efficiency Maine because that does work in cold climates.
Yeah, it's something that we're focused a lot of attention on when we switch the rebates over to whole home. You have a room heater and it's put in too small to heat the room in the coldest day of the year. You just turn on the backup heat. It's not really a big problem. But if you have a whole home heat pump and you don't size it properly and it gets really cold, like 0 or -7 or -14 out, you can be cold. And we don't want anyone to be cold with cold home heat pumps. So we require that the heat pumps are sized to meet the coldest day of the year, coldest hour of the year, as in order to get a rebate. And it's been working really, really well. It's been a big success.
Great. One other question before we move on to ask Colin a couple of questions. Do you recommend a backup source of heat? We have heard from many listeners wondering whether they should keep their existing heating systems, baseboards, oil boilers, forced hot air systems.
Backup, it's a yes and no. If you already have a boiler or a furnace or a stove, then it makes total sense to keep it for emergencies. But there's no need to buy a backup system. Our heat pumps don't need backup in the cold. As with the oil or gas system, if the power goes out, you're going to need a generator or wood stove or fireplace. But unlike oil or gas systems, there's no risk of running out of fuel. And most whole home heat pumps systems have more than one heat pump in them. So if one was to break, you actually have backup, something you wouldn't have. Most homes with boilers, furnaces wouldn't have a backup boiler. They just have one. So if that breaks, you're talking about no heat and frozen pipes. With heat pumps, you typically have more than one heat pump for a whole home system, and they back up. I have, as I mentioned, more than one heat pump in my house. The kitchen one broke. Actually, it turned out it didn't break, but I thought it was broken. It just needed to be reset. But we turned it off. And the den one in the room next door kept the kitchen warm. We cooked on all winter, no problem that way. So if you have backup already, it's not a need to get rid of it. But if you don't have backup, heat pumps don't need backup in the cold, would be my answer.
All right, now, Colin, I'm going to shift to you. Thank you, Andy. That was super helpful. Colin, you have a really unique perspective. You're an independent energy auditor, and you recently did an experiment at your house, which we actually wrote about in an article in our current issue on making the switch to whole house heat pumps to see how various improvements impacted the performance of your heating system. And you did this over a series of a few years. So I would like to hear about that. But before we do, can you tell us what is the role of an independent energy auditor?
Sure. So, as an independent auditor, I'm not a contractor. I don't sell insulation or heat pumps or solar panels or anything like that. So, as an independent auditor, I'm giving advice to people as how they can help make the house most energy efficient, whether it's insulation, whether it's heat pumps. Every house is unique. So, I'm going through taking several hours doing a number of diagnostic tests in the house. The efficiency, I'm looking at the indoor air quality, looking at combustion safety, big plugs for heat pumps. One of the things I realized when I put heat pumps in my house is when you electrify and you stop using fossil fuels, you are not making fire in your house anymore. So it helps me to sleep a little bit more easily at night, knowing that there's less things that are going to catch my house on fire. Um, but as an independent auditor, I'm able to do a lot of diagnostic testing, which actually helps heat pump contractors. I do the blower door test, which we see the graphic here. I use this graphic in my energy audit reports to make some recommendations that measures the air leakage rate of the house. And so if I can see how much air leakage there is, if there's a lot of air leakage in the house, I can kind of use this graphic to give it a bit of a score. So if the blower door is giving you a number, but this really helps to kind of put it into context of the square footage of the house as a ratio versus what the air leakage rate of the house is. So for something like this, if there's a lot of air leakage, then I'm going to recommend a lot of air sealing and insulation to help the heat pumps to work a lot better. Or if the house is fairly tight, if it's in a B or a C score, then I'll say go ahead and do the heat pumps, and then if there are some air sealing things to work on, then you can work on that later. But this kind of helps me to kind of prioritize what to focus on first.
That's helpful because sometimes you hear those numbers and you have no idea what they mean. My house is a 1.5, my house is a 3. What does that mean? So that's a great graphic. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the experiment that you did with your own home. And so as I understand it, you installed a heat pump and weatherized in stages to see the impact of each of the steps that you took. So what were the improvements that you made and what did you learn in that process?
Sure. When I bought my house in the beginning of 2021, it was somewhat insulated. And of course, the first thing I did when I bought my house is run a blower door test to see how much air leakage rate there was in my house. And so I sort of did the opposite of what I normally will tell people in a not very well insulated and air leaky house. I put the heat pump in first just to kind of do an experiment of my own to see how much of a difference the air sealing and insulation made in my house. So that was the very first thing I did. I put in a heat pump, and to be fair, I put in a 15,000 BTU heat pump. My propane heating system was a 60,000 BTU heating system. So, I'm putting in a heat pump which doesn't have as much heating capacity. So it kind of wasn't a fair experiment because I'm asking the heat pump to do just as much work as my more powerful propane heating system. But I put the heat pump in, which you can see right there on the wall. There it is. Uh, so I had that installed, and then I did a lot of insulation work. I significantly increased the insulation in my house. I brought the air leakage down by 50%. Still more work to do, but I made it a lot tighter. So when I first moved in and I just had the propane, I was spending about $600 a month to heat 1,300 square feet. And at this point, with my heat pump, that's all I use to heat my house now. I don't use the propane anymore. And so my highest heating bill this last winter was $138. And that's my electric bill for everything. So I'm guessing that it probably cost me about $400 or so to heat my house last winter with the heat pump. So obviously, I'm a big proponent of that, but also definitely taking into consideration the importance of air sealing and insulation, and shrinking the heat load of the house to be able to be heated with just one heat pump in my case.
And so what are the total BTUs in your house now? Is it still that single pump or do you have multiple units?
It's the single one. So I have kind of an open floor plan in my house. So one wall unit is able to get the whole first floor, and then enough heat goes up to the second floor that I don't really need a second heat pump. Maybe an extra blanket, a little cooler upstairs. But yeah, I mean that heats the house. That's all I use all through the winter, and it works really well.
Richard, I'm gonna look to you now. I know you've been thinking about and studying the house as a system for as long as I've known you, which I think is about 18 years, and I imagine probably even longer than that. So do you have anything to add about how insulation and air sealing can impact a heating system's performance?
And a lot of this is driven by the customer and the house. Sometimes customers are very well educated about everything going on in their house and everything. They've almost done their own energy audit and they're sharing it with us, and we put a star in their paper. And they're very proactive and well aware. And sometimes they just really need guidance. And where indoor air quality comes in is sometimes people haven't done their own homework in terms of fully understanding where the radon levels are in their house or how they're managing moisture in their house. what their airflow rate is. And especially in older houses, older farmhouses, they can be a lot trickier, especially for people with experience. And this is where, the total switch, like I did, I did a total switch. I did that last September, just as the whole house heat pump started. So I'm totally electrified. And like Colin, um, I knew I had opportunities for the envelope, but I did the heat pump first, knowing that I needed to do some things. But one thing that I did do is radon as well, treated the radon in my basement. Um, Radon is a big problem in Maine, and it's not the responsibility of a leaky house or a heating system or having leaky windows to mitigate radon, but that is in effect what happens. As you tighten up a house, put beautiful new windows, seal up cracks, radon levels, if they're leaking into your house, can go up. And same with a heating system. And I was shocked to learn years ago when I was just starting out, reading the manual of residential oil burners about how much air is needed, because you need enough combustion air to burn a gallon of oil. And I was shocked to learn it was equivalent to 11,500 gallons of air to disperse the droplets of oil to combust that fuel. And it's a huge successful accomplishment to reduce your combustion of 500 or 600 gallons of oil from being burned and switching to much greener sources. But that's a big reduction in airflow. And it really depends upon the house. My parents' house is 1820s, and there's dirt. And it's fairly leaky, and I have to convince my parents, hey, this is an issue. Oh, it never bothered us our whole lives, but as they get older, indoor air quality is a big deal. And moisture as well. Moisture can cause asthma, can cause mold and trigger people, and radon is not good. So dealing with moisture, dealing with indoor air quality issues become important as part of the heat pump, not because of the heat pump, but because people are making changes to their house. And the older the house, the trickier the house, the more our customers tend to find it's helpful to have a guide. People like Colin or us, those that really take the whole house approach. And that's the whole founding principle of the Building Performance Institute certifications, is to look at the interactions of the house and the unintended circumstances. And it all came out of low-income weatherization, where they were seeking through DOE grants to help low-income homes be more energy efficient. In those days, probably mostly weatherization, but by tightening up the home, or in this case, reducing airflow from combusting fuels, can have other things. So it's really important to look at it as a whole house, because people want to be comfortable, they want to be healthy, and they want to do the right thing. And sometimes there's a lot of moving parts.
Right. And I think sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming to homeowners to hear some of that and think, oh gosh, I've got to deal with moisture, I've got to deal with radon, maybe I'll just wait and throw up my hands because I don't know what to do. But in terms of the radon, which is really a serious risk here in Maine, it's fairly inexpensive to deal with radon, right?
Absolutely. And it's easy to miss. It's so easy to miss. And right now, with real estate changing over, it's such a tight market. Sometimes it's your sale offer is not contingent on an inspection, and then you finally got your financing and your inspection, you can move in. If you haven't had a radon test, it's so important just to know, irregardless of any plans you have for the energy plan for your house. And the mitigation, as best as I can tell, $2,000 to $3,000, unless you have open dirt like is at my parents' house, and that, there's various options available that often cost more, or mitigation plans to kind of control it.
I always recommend to homeowners to have a radon test, an ongoing test. So you can buy for $100 an electronic test that you can it just runs continuously, or you can get a smart indoor air quality sensor that you can install that has radon testing in it as well. So it's not, we have this technology available to us now, where before we just used the charcoal canisters, and really that's just a snapshot in time. That's just 1 week. And as Richard was saying, home inspection reports, they all recommend that you get a radon test done. And of course, most homeowners, like me, even me, say, yeah, okay, I'll get to that. But you buy the radon tester, and you can just monitor it continuously. And like you said, it's not too expensive. And here in New England, we have a lot more radon than most of the rest of the country because of all of our granite that our houses are built on. So there are now really inexpensive ways to be able to have more awareness about it.
And thanks for bringing that up. I'll add a little plug to the same issue. Our fall edition that has the article about making the switch to heat pumps also has an article about those home air quality testers. So if you're curious to learn more and see some brands, pros and cons of different brands, that's in there as well. So Andy, I know you have a lot of experience in all of these topics as well. So I want to see if you have anything to add to this. And I know at some point we want to get to the financing options that Efficiency Maine offers as well to help.
I'm glad that we've got Colin and Richard here to talk about weatherization while we're in a heat pump chat, because they work really well together. They complement one another. And that's why we rebate both. We offer up to $8,000 for weatherization, and we offer up to $8,000 in addition to that for heat pumps. Weatherization can solve problems like ice dams or frozen pipes or cold spots or drafts and high heating bills. That's what weatherization does. Heat pumps, other than high bills, don't address those issues. Heat pumps provide low-cost heating and air conditioning and dehumidification. And Colin and Richard did the heat pump first. I did weatherization first. The real important thing is to do all of the above. It's kind of like, if you want to lose weight, should you diet or exercise? And the truth is, you should do both. You should have a healthy diet, and you should keep yourself physically fit as well. So we offer funds. And while we're going whole house, Richard, I'm glad you mentioned that. And Colin, I know you little read it. We also offer very generous rebates on water heating, which doesn't really interact with the home as much. But Richard mentioned moisture. A heat pump water heater, which is something that we offer generous rebates for, can help dehumidify a basement. It won't replace a dehumidifier. If you go away on vacation for a humid week in August and no one's using water in your house, the heat pump water heater is not going to run. It's not going to dehumidify. But if you have a dehumidifier, you can leave it in place, and it will work less hard if there's a heat pump water heater nearby that's being used. So they all work together. And you raise a point, Heather. We don't want to get everyone worried about getting into a paralysis, but worried about which doing first. We recommend them all. We've got a database of 700 independent contractors, including Richard's company and Colin's company. And we've got thousands of dollars in rebates. We have information that thousands of dollars of federal tax credits. And for income qualifying people, we'll lend the balance of the money to try and make it affordable for everybody. That's exactly the goal. The goal is, between rebates and financing, you can switch to a more comfortable, lower maintenance, more efficient home and immediately be saving money. So people ask, how long does it take to pay back? It doesn't take any time to pay back. It actually costs less immediately if you finance it. For heat pumps, we've got Efficiency Maine rebates and federal tax credits combined to give you back up to $10,600 on a heat pump, or over $9,000 on installation, or $1,000 on heat pumps. Just to put that into terms of math, you could get a $10,000 heat pump. Most people in Maine qualify for getting a $10,000 heat pump and only pay $2,000 to $4,000. And we can finance that. It's like $20 or $30 or $40 a month. You'd be saving $1,000 a year and you're paying $20, $30 a month. There is no payback. You're immediately richer and you're more comfortable. You can get $10,000 worth of insulation, paying only $2,000 to $5,000 net. That could save you $1,000 a year, and you're only paying again $20, $30, $40 a month. And heat pump water heater is the biggest example. You can get a $1,800 heat pump water heater. They're discounted down to $1,400 in Maine. We'll give an instant discount, not a mail-in rebate, instant discount at Home Depot or Lowe's today through the end of the month. You can buy an $1,800 heat pump water heater for $399, and they can save $500 a year. It's less than a 1-year payback. And if you want to finance that, it would be immediately cash flow positive. So there's really never been a better time to invest in energy efficiency for financial reasons, and of course the comfort reasons are big there. So it's exciting times.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very helpful. I would like to switch to some listener questions, but before I do, I want to ask if anyone has any final points to add before we do open up to some questions.
In general, it's totally correct. One or the other, insulation or heat pump. But there are some code issues that we have run across in basements. If you intend to heat the basement with a heat pump and it's not up to code, there are code officials, and the state fire marshal who interprets the code has instructed us that it has to be meeting the current code if you are putting a heat pump in the basement. So that's something you want to be aware of. If you pop that in, suddenly the inspection kind of reveals under a little bit of urgency, you need to get the insulation. So that's an example where you want to make sure you have the whole picture. The other thing is comfort. We haven't really talked about comfort as well. And comfort can be really easy in newer houses that are simpler and really tough than others. And so having a really clear idea of comfort in my own house, I already knew it was coming, so I wasn't alarmed. But by making the switch to heat pumps, my floors became very cold, and this morning was the first time that I really noticed it. And part of the reason why it's really cold is the interactive effect of my awesome hot water heater that's a heat pump, because it's harvesting that heat. So we're getting a lot of calls to insulate the floors rather than try to heat the basement, because again, if you heat the basement with heat pumps, you need to insulate it. So the comfort of the floors is another big one. I just wore sneakers working from home, and I was fine until I get to insulate the floor eventually. But there's a lot of interactive things that, we find in each case, and with older houses, it's a little trickier because a single head heat pump is kind of like the old days that I remember fondly. You have a wood stove that you all gather around, and it's not as much of an issue if you have distributed heat pump supply like much of the rest of the country. But Maine is really going gangbusters on the one-to-one heat pumps where it's a single place. So it makes each person in each house is a little bit different to achieve that comfort.
So that's a great plug for doing some sort of audit before you get started, to just really get an understanding of the whole house and how things work together, and potential steps that you could be taking.
Doing an energy audit, one of the kind of zoomed out approaches I'm looking at, in addition to the things that we've talked about, is the interaction with heat pumps and solar. So unless you are heating your house with the wood that you cut down from the 40 acres behind your property, which I certainly don't have, most people in Maine are relying on oil or propane, natural gas to be delivered to their house, and you're sort of at the mercy of whatever they're going to charge. And so if you have heat pumps and solar together, at that point, that's really one of the only ways that you can produce your own heat in your house. So that kind of gives you some energy independence. You're no longer at the mercy of the cost of delivered fuels. You're generating all of your own electricity to make your own heat.
This is probably a good time to also share that Maine has, so if you're using your utility service here in Maine, we have some of the cleanest public utility energy in the country. So I know sometimes people feel like, well, you know, they're burning fossil fuels to create electricity. So how is it any better if we're switching to heat pumps? But in Maine, it is significantly better because we do have such clean power generation. So, okay, well, let's switch to some questions because we do have quite a few here. We received a question from Lance, who is wondering how you can keep your basement warm and dry when you switch from an oil boiler to a whole house heat pump system.
It definitely depends on the house. But just to sketch it, my house is built in 2007 and my parents' house is built in 1820. My house built in 2007. I just bought it last year, so I haven't gotten to insulating. So I'm going to have an easier time of it because I don't have the same moisture problems. But definitely having a moisture plan, sometimes the heat pump water heater will take care of all, a lot of your moisture with some supplements. But are you having living space down there, or are you concerned about the floor being warm? There's many ways to go about it, and coming up with a plan that really checks all the boxes. It's really important. The clearer you are and what you're expecting out of this. Sometimes people want to have an office in the basement. That's a totally different thing. And if you have all these expensive finishes, all this stuff is really important to incorporate, especially with the new flooding we're getting with downpours sometimes in January. And if your system is not up to snuff, my 2007 house probably has code required drainage underneath, so it won't have the issue. But the 1820s house, that's a totally different matter. And so if you're trying to address it to keep things preserved down there and to preserve air quality, that could be one goal. You may not want to be setting up your office in the basement in an 1820s with a dirt floor, but you may have aspirations. That's a deeper retrofit. But this comes into more expert territory. But if you want some suggestions on this, buildingscience.com is a great source of materials on different assemblies. But depending upon the age of your house, you may want to engage with some professional assistance, or if you're determined to do it yourself, like I was before starting Evergreen, I went to buildingscience.com.
Great. Thanks, Richard. We have a question from Susan, who is a renter in Portland, and she's wondering, how can renters find a way to undertake this transition from gas-powered heat to a heat pump in our homes? For example, would it be necessary to lobby the relevant apartment management company? And if so, what facts could be used to convince them that this change would be beneficial to them? So I'm thinking, Andy, this is a good one for you to start with and maybe talk about some of the commercial programs that Efficiency Maine has as well.
Yes. Colin, I were with a bunch of landlords yesterday, and some of the things that landlords find compelling about heat pumps is, one is, first of all, it gets the landlord out of the heat utility business. Apartment buildings that have more than one unit and a central boiler or furnace means that the landlord has to pay the heating bill, but the tenants get control over the thermostats and the windows. So they can open the windows in the middle of the winter, and the landlord is the one who takes responsibility for paying that bill. Or the landlord puts a lock on the thermostat, and now it'll save the landlord money, but it may leave the tenant uncomfortable. With heat pumps, you could put the heat pump for each apartment on the electric meter for each apartment. And that way, if the tenant wants to have the windows open in the middle of winter and leave it really warm inside, the tenant can. The tenant has complete control, but also would pay the cost of doing that. So that's a really nice advantage for landlords, because most of them would rather not be in the heat utility business. Another reason that landlords find heat pumps attractive is, one, they can offer central air equivalent to their tenants, and two, they don't have to be worried about the damage to windows of window units being installed, unstalled, and stored. It's a real low hassle way to make everybody happy. The tenants save money and are more comfortable, and the landlords can get out of the uncomfortable situation of paying for something they don't have control over. And we have, I'm glad you mentioned our commercial rebates, Heather. We've got rebates for heat pumps for pretty much any building in Maine. Single family duplex, 3-zone condos, giant multifamily, commercial, institutional, have very, very generous rebates. So if you're a renter and you'd like to be able to benefit from the advantages of heat pump, I encourage you to steer your landlord toward efficiencymaine.com and maybe show them some of the incentives they could get, where they could improve the value of their property and get out of the heat utility. That would be my suggestion for renters who want to take advantage of heat pumps.
That was great. Are there any case studies by chance on efficiencymaine.com for landlords with multi-units?
I believe there are. We're rebidding lots of them. They're very, very popular with multifamilies.
Great. All right. Thank you. Anyone have anything else to add to that?
There's some exciting developments coming from Efficiency Maine in the future. And if it's a low income multifamily, it's not ready now, but it's coming. And there's going to be a big push to get low income multifamily switched over to heat pumps. And that's in the future. So if you're in the low income category, you could start planting the seed with your landlord company so that they hear it from the tenants as well as they hear from Efficiency Maine and others once that becomes ready. That's a very, very exciting development.
That's great. Thank you, Richard. There was another question that I think relates to that, and it is if nonprofits who are building workforce housing are eligible for any of the Efficiency Maine rebates.
I'd give the same answer. Heavens, yes. Efficiencymaine.com, we've got rebates like we've never had before. And we'd love, or just give us a call at 866-376-2463 or visit efficiencymaine.com. We would love to offer rebates for nonprofits providing workforce housing. What would that?
So one question is, I am interested in accessibility to marginalized communities. How are they being reached and what efforts are being made around mobile homes, for instance?
I'm really glad someone asked, because one of the most exciting things that we have at Efficiency Maine, the residential side, is a low-income mobile home heat pump rebate program. Mobile homes are a challenge. It's tough to insulate the attic because they don't have one. It's tough to insulate the basement because they don't have one. It's tough to insulate the walls because they're 2 inches thick. The real shame of it is because they don't have basements, they have to have the fuel outside, which means they can't use oil. They have to use kerosene, which is more expensive than oil, or propane, which is the most expensive way to heat a home besides electric baseboard. So this is just the worst of all worlds. People who need the help the most are paying the most to heat their homes. And now we have a solution, a whole home heat pump for a mobile home. We will arrange the installation of a whole home heat pump for a mobile home. And the mobile home resident can either pay $2,000 upfront and we'll pay the rest, or they can just pay $50 a month for 50 months to get a whole mobile home heat pump that'll give them very low cost, lowest cost heating available, and it'll give them air conditioning in the summer. It's a really exciting program, and encourage people to go to efficiencymaine.com to learn about it. We're really pleased we can finally have a fabulous story for people in mobile homes, low-income people in mobile homes.
That's wonderful. And you have some tiered rebates and financing as well that has preference to lower income families.
Yes, thank you. I should have said that. I got so excited about the mobile homes, I forgot. Oh, and every other house in the state as well. We offer for people who are participating in SNAP, TANF, LIHEAP, or Maine Care, we offer rebates of 80% of the cost up to $8,000. So if any house, mobile home or not, that's low income occupied, you could get, for example, a $10,000 heat pump, whole home heat pump, and pay $2,000. Oh, and we would finance that. So that's a really great offering for every home, mobile home or not. Yeah, thank you, Heather. I almost missed the big one. So we're really pleased that we've got fabulous offerings for people in marginalized communities.
Next one for you, Colin. What advice do you have for folks with older houses like yours?
Well, obviously, I'm partial to having an energy audit done, whether it's me or any of the other auditors in the state. There are also the community programs like the York Energy Coach program, and there are other volunteer community groups popping up in the state to advise people, kind of taking an independent view of trying to advise people to make their houses more energy efficient. One of the most helpful things for me when I do energy audits in older houses is using the blower door to see how much air leakage there is. Everybody knows about insulation and knows that they should be getting more insulation done in their house, but air sealing is also a very, very important part. You lose a lot of heat through air leakage. So using the blower door to see how much air leakage you have in your house. If you have to heat the entire volume of air in your house, 20 or 30 times every hour just to maintain heat in the house, because you have a very leaky house, then obviously your boiler or furnace has to really work overtime. So I use the blower door a lot. Also, using the infrared camera really helps to be able to find where there might be voids or walls with missing insulation. With the blower door and infrared camera together, I can actually see where there's cold air coming into the house. So for old houses, this is where it's really especially important to have someone who's familiar with building science to be able to advise you, because in an 1850s farmhouse, insulation wasn't invented at that point. Heat pumps weren't invented at that point. So you have a lot of old houses in Maine. We have some of the oldest housing stock in the country. A lot of old houses that were never designed to be tight. And that's not to say you shouldn't do that. It's just, you have to have someone on your team as part of this planning process to consider, like what Richard was saying, the whole house approach, the unintended consequences, making sure that as you tighten the house and install heat pumps, that you're not creating issues unintended in the house.
Tracy is asking if it's required to have a second source of heat in addition to heat pumps for home insurance purposes in Maine. I think a lot of people think that their insurance is going to require that. Can you provide an answer for that one?
Yes, I can. And in fact, I was just on the phone with the Maine State Bureau of Insurance this morning on that topic. And the answer is, it depends. Some insurance companies are not comfortable insuring a house that's heated only with heat pumps. They want to make sure there's some type of backup. And some are comfortable. We have a list on efficiencymaine.com in our heat pump FAQ, frequently asked questions section, and we list them. We list 5 large insurance companies that will insure homes that have heat pumps as the sole source of heat. And the concern, just to be clear, if you have a furnace or boiler and you turn it off and turn on heat pumps, full home heat pumps, that's fine with insurance companies. What makes them nervous is when you remove a furnace or boiler. And so you ought to check with your insurer, make sure that that doesn't impact your insurance. And if it does, we've got a list of insurance companies that'd be happy to insure your home.
Great, thanks, Andy. Question from Ben. Can heat pumps run when we lose power and have the house running on a portable generator? I know that you can wire your heat pump outlets to your generator.
Yes, you can definitely run heat pumps off of a generator, but full disclosure, heat pumps use more electricity than a boiler. A boiler does use mostly oil and just a little bit of electricity to pump the fuel and pump the water, blow the air. So you need a bigger generator for a heat pump than you would for a boiler or a furnace. And heat pumps are more sensitive to the quality of electricity. So if there's static, that's my word, but if there's not modulated AC power, there's electronics in heat pumps that doesn't exist in boilers and furnaces. So they're a bit more fussy about the quality of the power. So they take more power and they need better quality than a boiler or furnace. You can definitely run a heat pump. I was at a friend's house on a generator. I was at a friend's house yesterday who runs heat pumps to heat and cool their home all year long, and they are off the grid. So they're 100% on battery or solar or generator, and they have for years. So that can definitely be done.
There's an element of having a resiliency plan, because it seems like electricity outages are big. It seems to be emerging as something that happens more often and sometimes for longer, and sometimes it's a coast. But this is where you have an opportunity to kind of size up your plan. It might be a generator, or it might be how do you coast, and it could be making sure you have better insulation, air sealing, or another really important technique that made a huge impact in my house was honeycomb shades, or the interior storms in all your windows. It can help you coast longer, especially if you have a heat pump and you're trying to minimize, burning a fossil fuel to power it. If you have the shades down, you have better insulation, it'll coast for longer. And maybe there'll be Powerwall options. I'm looking at it myself. I don't have any things to report back to, but I'm determined not to get a generator.
Another plug for our fall issue, which actually has an article on backup backup power sources. So check that out if you're curious to learn some more ideas. So do heat pumps have to meet certain efficiency standards to qualify for the federal tax credit? And how can a homeowner identify which ones qualify? That's from Kaya.
Like online, yes. And efficiencymaine.com has details. The federal tax credit for heat pumps is called 25C tax credit. I don't know why they named it that. And if you go to efficiencymaine.com, you'll see, if you click on At Home, you'll see a list of the rebates and federal tax credits for heat pumps. If you click that link, you'll get to Energy Star, and you can make your way to the IRS website. There's both a DOE spreadsheet listing them, and there is also a database where you can look them up. Either are very easy, but if you talk to an installer, which is what I'd recommend, go to efficiencymaine.com and look at our vendor locator. The installers, many of them can help make sure the one you pick is tax credit eligible. And I would say that all the ones that are rebate eligible are eligible for federal tax credit, so they know that. So we intentionally designed our program to align with the federal tax credit. There are some that are eligible, like room heaters, eligible for federal tax credit. They're not eligible for rebates, but if it's eligible for rebates, it should be in good shape on the heat pump for federal tax credits.
Great, thanks. What's the life expectancy of a heat pump?
We don't know. One of the problems we had, they haven't been breaking yet. I've had one for 12 years. The warranties are 10 or 12 years. We assume at Efficiency Maine, where we estimate our savings, an 18-year life. And I suspect what's going to happen is going to be kind of like a cell phone or a laptop. When I bought the first ones at my house, they were 350% efficient. That was 12 years ago. That was pretty mind-boggling, 350. I bought more 5 years ago, additional ones. I didn't replace them, but I bought more. They're 400% efficient, which makes 350 not quite as impressive. If you buy them today, they're now 450% efficient. So another 10 years from now, when mine, if they're tired at that point, we might just be replacing them before they break. Like a laptop that's 20 years old, you probably don't want it to last another year. It's probably the performance has improved so much, we'll probably be obsolete and able to upgrade before we worry about it breaking. So that they have moving parts that can be broken. They have parts that can break, and you could have them serviced, kind of like a boiler or a furnace. You can keep fixing it. That's our answer. Somewhere around 18 years, and at that point.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. We have come to the end of the session. Believe it or not, there are lots more questions we didn't get to. So thank you again, Andy and Richard and Colin. This was super informative, and I'm so grateful to you all for joining us and sharing your lunch hour with us. Thank you again to our sponsors, Royal River Heat Pumps and Senecal Construction Services, and to our webinar producer, Rain Rayner, who manages everything so beautifully behind the scenes. You can learn more about making the switch to whole home heat pumps, as I mentioned in the latest article from our fall issue that is online at greenmainehomes.com, where you can also find out about future episodes of Home and Energy Chats and catch up on recordings from our past episodes. So check that out.